King's Landing. Rhaegar stands before his father in the throne room, all the Kingsguard members looking down on him. The prince announces how he has heard of the conflict and wants to help his family, to end the war. A long silence follows, until eventually Aerys sends everyone away, leaving only the two of them. Once they are alone, Aerys walks to his son and hits him hard across the face, again and again and again, letting out all of his rage and emotions. Whatever blow his father hits him with, Rhaegar continues to stand on his feet, just taking all of it. When his rage is over, Aerys curses him. Where was he? Why did he abandon them? Insult after insult flies at him. But Rhaegar is silent. He eventually says he can't undo the past. What he did was not an act to betray the family, but an act to live for himself for once. When Aerys asks if Rhaegar killed Lyanna Stark, the prince stays silent, only saying that she's gone, never to be seen again. Aerys thinks. At the end, Rhaegar wants to help his father win this conflict, to help his family, to help their house, to ensure its survival. He's a Targaryen. He will fight a Targaryen. Aerys looks down at his son for a long time and eventually accepts his proposal. Rhaegar is relieved, but it's then that he claims that if they are to win this war, they should ask for the support of the Lannisters. Aerys almost immediately snaps again. He will die before he asks aid of that betraying swine of Tywin. Rhaegar does his best to convince his father otherwise. They need the manpower to strike back against the rebels. This is the battle that could decide everything. And it might not be too late to make a pact with Tywin and restore their alliance. But whatever he says, Aerys just spits it back out. A long silence follows between the two. The king lastly mentions, completely avoiding the subject, that Elia is here as well, with her 2 children. That sends a shiver down Rhaegar's spine. Later, Rhaegar visits Elia's chamber, where she sits on a balcony with her 2 children. Upon seeing him, she looks like she sees a ghost. Not a word is said between the two. Rhaegar slowly walks towards her and looks long at little Aegon and Rhaenys. He smiles. Elia just waits for him to say something, but nothing comes. He wants to, he tries to, but he can't. Finally, he does apologize. He never wanted to hurt her, but she deserves another man, another future. Once the war ends, everything will be arranged. She will be able to head back to Dorne to her family. That's what she deserves. His words are kind, but feel empty. Elia is mostly silent and eventually thanks him. Their moment ends as Rhaegar gently holds his baby son in his arms. And yet in this moment, his thoughts go to one person and one person alone. Lyanna. At Riverrun, the bells sound outside as everyone readies to march out again. Catelyn wakes up in her bed as she sees Eddard dressing himself in his armor. He tells her they all have to leave now. It will probably be a long time before they see each other again, but he promises they will. Catelyn again thinks of Brandon. He said the same thing. Ned understands, but he is not his brother. He gently kisses her and bids her courage before also leaving. Outside, Eddard rallies with Robert, Jon, Halster, Howland and all of the other forces. The rebel army ready to march down south. Halster claims they have heard reports of how the Targaryen forces are preparing to march north. They will cut them off before they come too close. They have even received a very specific message, saying Aerys intends on crossing the Trident. Eddard finds it queer how they keep on receiving messages from the capital, all of them betraying the king. Robert laughs, finding it obvious. Aerys has enemies everywhere, even in his own home. And these mysterious messages have been just until now. There is only one person who is able to spread information like that. And he is right under the king's nose. In the Red Keep, Varys stares from a window out to the courtyard where a large portion of the army is also readying themselves to march out. Varys himself prays for the right side to win. The right side. Dressed in black armor, Rhaegar walks through the halls and visits his mother in her chamber. Unlike his father, she smiles with joy when seeing him again. They have a very emotional and heartfelt moment together as Rhaegar tries to explain his actions. Without saying anything about Lyanna, he mentions how he has been living in a prison all his life. Yet since the tourney at Harrenhal, something happened that made him feel alive. Something inside him spoke, as if the path that he wanted to take would have been of great importance. Rhaella understands. She knows some of us are made for duty, and others for love. Sadly, we just simply can't choose which one we are. But Rhaegar did, and she understands. She can only pray that he will come back to her. They embrace each other as the prince also takes a final look at young Viserys, who's playing on the ground with some toys. Rhaegar also quickly caresses his mother's pregnant belly, wishing her happiness and luck. Afterwards, Rhaegar walks through the halls and into the throne room where all the Kingsguard members stand. He greets every single one of them as if nothing happened. He greets Jaime, who nods. He greets Barristan, who is very pleased to see him again. And he greets Arthur, acting like nothing is the matter. The prince looks at all of them and says that this will be the time to see where their true loyalties lie. As everyone leaves, Rhaegar stays behind with Jaime for a moment. Jaime asks him about his proposal to call for help from Tywin, his father. Rhaegar sighs as he says that his proposition failed. Tywin will have to make a decision himself. It might not be too late. The last thing Rhaegar asks of Jaime is that he takes care of his family and protect them, all of them, with his life, until he returns. Jaime nods his head, promising he'll do that. Not much later, the massive army departs King's Landing. Aerys stands on his balcony as he watches the force leave, feeling like a dragon himself. Varys also watches the host depart. Now that Arthur Dayne is gone, Varys finds himself alone. As he walks through the empty halls, all he can do is pray. Both armies march, both that of the rebels and that of the king. All thousands of men ready to die for their lords. Rhaegar filled with honor and duty, Ned filled with vengeance and justice, Robert filled with vengeance and rage. Through the landscapes of Westeros, they march. They march towards their clash. They march towards their fate. Many nights later, the Targaryen hosts has set up camp not too far from the banks of the Trident. A massive camp. Rhaegar stands in the main tent together with his generals and some of the Kingsguards. They look at a map from the area. Scouts have spotted the rebel army as well, far smaller than their own. Come the dawn, they will try to stop Rhaegar from crossing the river. A discussion is held as Rhaegar decides their plan of attack. Cavalry, archers, infantry, everything is decided. Suddenly, trumpets are heard from outside. Rhaegar and the others all head out to see what's going on, only to see an additional host arriving. A Dornish host. They are stunned to see. Their commander is Lewin Martell, the uncle of Prince Doran. He greets Rhaegar, saying they have come to support their cause since the alliance between House Targaryen and House Martell is still strong. Rhaegar is very pleased and welcomes all of them. He invites Lewin into the tent where they continue their discussion. In the camp of the rebels, the same discussion is held in the main tent of Robert. Eddard, Jon, Hoster and many others are also present. Their scouts have also brought news of the Targaryen host, now joined by new Martell soldiers. They are vastly outnumbered. All odds are against them. Morale isn't very high, but Robert is destined. He knows their men are more battle-hardened. Each and every one of them will fight harder than 10 Targaryen loyalists. They will come at them hard and strong, cut through their lines like paper. Although Jon and Hoster are the big lords, Robert is clearly the one who is in charge, giving orders and commanding everyone. After the meeting, Robert approaches Hoster and tells him that he has another plan for him and his men. Hoster curiously nods and listens carefully. Eddard walks to the camp as everyone spends the night before the battle. Some eat and drink, others sleep, others train. Ned finds Howland at one of the tents. They have a nice moment as Ned asks him how he's feeling, to which Howland admits that he's petrified. They share their thoughts about the coming day, how it might go, how it might end. Ned claims he loves Robert and will follow him anywhere, but he fears that perhaps no one will win the fight that is about to happen. Eventually, Howland asks him a confronting question. Does he think she's still alive? Lyanna? Ned hopes so, but he's also a realist. Whatever it might be, it won't stop Robert from taking his revenge. No one can stop that man now. The two men share a drink as they want to enjoy the night as best they can. At the Targaryen camp, Luwin Martell meet with Rhaegar in private. As they are alone, Luwin claims he didn't fully tell his motivations when he arrived. He wanted to say those to the prince himself in person. Rhaegar is now confused. Eventually, the Dornish man says that he didn't arrive here purely because of their alliance, but because Prince Doran and Oberyn received disturbing news of the king. He's not holding Elia and the Red Keep out of support. He's holding her as a hostage to ensure the Dornish support. Rhaegar's heart almost breaks upon hearing that, but he knows he can't prove the man wrong. And because Rhaegar can't answer, Luwin sighs. He eventually states that if this rebellion should fail, the next one won't. Later, Rhaegar meets Arthur in Barristan. The three of them also have a bit to drink as they talk about tomorrow. They also recall fond memories from the past, indicating once again that they are good friends. Barristan eventually asks Rhaegar if he can speak his mind. Rhaegar allows it. Barristan then openly admits that Rhaegar is the finest man he has ever met, but a fool to chase his heart and leave his wits behind. Rhaegar smiles, saying that that's why he respects him so much. No lies, just honesty. Eventually, Rhaegar takes Arthur with him, and they go along for a walk through the woods where they are alone. The prince then asks him if he can ask whatever is necessary. Arthur claims he's a Kingsguard. He will do whatever his king commands. Rhaegar smiles. He is not a king. Arthur nods his head. To him, he is a king. It's then that Rhaegar asks Arthur to take a man, his finest man, and ride to Dorne. Lyanna is normally safe and sound with the nurses at the tower, but he fears she might not be safe for long. Arthur didn't expect that. His place is here, beside his prince. They have a brief squabble, but eventually Arthur nods his head and promises Rhaegar to fulfill his wish. He will leave as soon as possible. Before Arthur leaves, he asks if he should deliver a message. Rhaegar thinks for a long time, and then goes through his pockets, where he fetches a foiled-up piece of cloth. Inside are the blue winter roses that don't at all look beautiful anymore, but the message will be clear enough. Arthur kneels a final time before his prince, and then heads off. Rhaegar stays behind in the forest, where he prays before the gods, not for his own life, but for that of Lyanna. Arthur goes to the camp and finds two of his fellow Kingsguards, Oswell Went and Gerald Hightower. He summons the both of them to join him. Both Oswell and Gerald are confused, but once Arthur claims it's by orders of the prince, the two of them follow him. The three men jump on a horse and ride away. Both Robert and Rhaegar spend their night by themselves. Both sit in their tent as they pray. Both praying for strength. Robert has his eyes closed as he thinks about Lyanna, all their moments together, how he loved her. He then holds a small wooden figure in his hands, slightly shaped like a woman, representing the love of his life. He kisses it and begs the gods for her life. At that same exact moment, Rhaegar prays for the exact same thing. The next dawn, Rhaegar and several of his generals, including Kingsguard Barristan Selmy, stand along the riverbank on horseback. They are met by Robert, Ned, Jon, and Hoster. It takes a long time before something is said. Finally, Rhaegar pleads them to surrender. They don't have the men, let alone the power and force to stop them. There are numerous reasons why this whole cause is foolish. The Targaryens have ruled for hundreds of years. Jon Arryn responds, stating numbers don't mean anything when the majority of the force fights out of terror and fright. Their men, the so-called rebels, fight for what they believe in, justice and vengeance. Hoster even addresses Barristan, saying that he's a good man but an idiot to fight for a murdering madman. Barristan doesn't answer. Insults are said, but throughout it all, Robert keeps on staring Rhaegar dead in the eyes. Eventually, the man asks his opponent one thing. Where is she? Rhaegar doesn't respond. When Robert asks if she's still alive, still no response comes. The meeting ends when Rhaegar simply says, "It will soon end." Robert shakes his head. No. It has only just begun. The two parties leave each other. Robert arrives back at his army camp as the horns sound for full alert. Everyone is rallied to begin. Eddard listens as Robert almost roars like an animal. There is pure hate in his eyes, and it scares him. In Red Keep, Varys sits in his office as he hands out sweets to several of his little birds, all of them giving certain information. As he's alone, he quickly packs some luggage. Whatever he's doing, he's clearly not intending to stay here. As he packs several of his belongings, someone knocks on the door. It's a Targaryen soldier who claims the king wishes to see him. Varys feels his heart pounding, but decides to go along with it. The moment he walks out into the hallway, he's surrounded by several soldiers and put in chains. They beat his face with the pommels of their swords. As the spider is bleeding, Aerys also appears. He spits at him, claiming he's just a feeble, weak spider, now that his sword isn't here anymore. Before Varys can say anything, he's taken away and thrown into the dungeons. At the banks of the Trident, the massive Targaryen host stands ready. Thousands of infantry, horse riders, and archers, all waiting. Rhaegar sits at the front, with Barristan and Luwin Martell beside him. They hear drums in the distance, a loud thunder of footsteps approaching. It takes minutes, seemingly hours, until the drums finally stop. And then it's completely silent. Too silent. Rhaegar can feel something is wrong, until they suddenly hear the sounds of horses charging. From over the hills in front of them, hundreds of riders come charging at full speed. Rhaegar orders all of the archers to knock, draw, and loose. A rain of steel erupts into the air, taking down a vast amount of the attackers. More and more keep coming, but almost all of them are taken down by arrows. Dozens manage to reach the front line, but they get cut down by infantry. Hundreds die, but Rhaegar feels it in his heart. This is wrong. Something isn't right. Robert Baratheon isn't even among them. Where is he? That's when suddenly an immensely loud horn is sounded, not from the north, but from the east and south. Rhaegar turns around and suddenly sees a massive host charging over the hills from the side. Robert Baratheon leading while swinging his hammer like a beast. It was a decoy. They were surrounding them. Rhaegar immediately orders his men to turn around and form a defensive circle around the camp. The moment this order is given, another horn is heard. This one coming completely from behind them, as Hoster Tully arrives with his Tully forces. Unaware to anyone, he used another bridge to flank the Targaryen camp by order of Robert. The thousands of Targaryen soldiers hold their spears tight as a horde of northerners comes charging at them. Arrows fly in the air, taking out many of the cavalry. But these aren't just several hundreds. These are thousands, with the Great Stag at the helm, followed by Eddard, Jon, and Howland, all of them roaring as they wield their swords. The armies clash right there as a wall of horses rams through the weak Targaryen line. Robert swings with his hammer at every man he sees. Eddard is right behind him. Rhaegar orders Lewin Martell to hold the flank with his Dornish forces, which he does. Barristan looks at his prince and says he'll be right behind him. The two share a final smile, then take out their swords and ride with all the Targaryen cavalry directly towards the attackers. The crash between the two armies is brutal and bloody. Horses get tumbled over, people fly to the air, blood is everywhere. Howland's horse gets rammed to the side, causing him to fall to the ground. Now starts one long continuous shot as we follow Howland through the chaos. He grabs his sword and slashes through several soldiers, horses riding all around him, arrows narrowly missing him. Then he gets pushed to the ground. A Dornish warrior raises his sword at him, but just gets stabbed from behind by Eddard. Eddard helps Howland back up as the battle rages on. Now we follow Ned as he fights along Howland and other Stark men, all saving each other from death. They charge head-on towards several Targaryen soldiers. Eddard eventually grabs a spear, throws it in the air towards other enemies. We follow the spear, and it impales a rider while still on horseback. The man falls to the ground right next to Barristan. We now follow Barristan's Selmy as he completely butchers people left and right. He shows his pure skill and artwork as he slashes and stabs and dodges and kills. Eventually, he bumps into Rhaegar, both killing one man together. We now follow Rhaegar as he rallies with his men, all charging towards Tully forces. Numerous Targaryen loyalists to protect the prince, some even throwing themselves in front of him to save his lives from arrows. Rhaegar also stabs enemies left and right. Archers rally behind him and fire another rain of steel. Now we follow the archers through the air as they all fly over the massive battle, striking down several Arryn soldiers. That's where Robert on his horse comes, as he goes berserk with his warhammer, smashing every man that he meets with his horse. He seems unstoppable until finally his horse is impaled by a spear. The man falls down, but is helped up by Eddard. Robert, Eddard, Howland, and numerous others now stand next to each other as they face another horde of Targaryen soldiers. All together, they charge at full speed, and thus the carnage ensues. This point is where the long shot finally ends. The battle is hard, the battle is long, and the battle is relentless. People die everywhere, but slowly and surely, the Targaryen forces find themselves being surrounded by the rebels, all of them being pushed back towards the river. Lewin Martell fights hard alongside his soldiers until he comes face to face with Jon Arryn. The two men also battle amidst the chaos. They seem to be equal to each other for a while, until Jon manages to kick him down in the water and stab him right through the heart, killing the Martell Lord. Ned and Robert also keep fighting alongside each other, killing like a perfect killing machine. It's there that Robert sees Rhaegar in the distance. He starts to storm right at him, despite Eddard yelling after him not to do that. Barristan warns the prince, but Rhaegar orders the man to stand back. Robert comes running at him along the river and demands a final time where Lyanna is. Rhaegar still doesn't respond, and that's what does it. Robert swings his hammer in the air, and right there in the water along the bank of the Trident, the two lords battle. Robert slashes with all the power he has while Rhaegar fights back with his sword and shield, both wearing their grand stag and dragon helms. Amidst the fire and water, they fight. All the while the chaos still happening all around them. Robert roars like an animal, while Rhaegar uses every bit of strength to defend himself. Every blow Rhaegar swings, Robert manages to block with his hammer, again and again. Robert slashes so hard that Rhaegar falls over. The stag is just about to strike down, but Rhaegar crawls to the side and manages to slice through Robert's leg. The stag yells out his pain, but keeps going. Then the sword and hammer clash again, both men using their bodies to push the other away. Rhaegar again falls over, but quickly stands back up. Barristan witnesses the fight from a distance. He doesn't care anymore and decides to run towards them in order to help out his prince. But then a whole horde of Stark men blocks his way. Barristan yells loudly and starts to cut down all of them. He needs to reach Rhaegar. He needs to help his prince. Robert keeps on beating down his opponents. Then a hard blow hits Rhaegar's face, blood spilling everywhere. He falls down in the water as Robert swings away the dragon's sword. Rhaegar only has his shield left now. Barristan does everything he can to reach his prince. He even orders others to get over there and protect him. Rhaegar holds his shield up high as Robert completely unleashes on him. Rhaegar can't hold on anymore. Barristan finally kills all of his opponents and runs as fast as he can towards the prince. But then another rain of arrows comes down, and one of them hits the Kingsguard in the leg, causing Barristan to fall down in the water. Rhaegar finally stands up and uses his shield to fight back. With every blow he gives, he sees Lyanna before him. But then it's Robert again, smashing his hammer against Rhaegar's shield. Blow after blow after blow, until Robert knocks away Rhaegar's shield and brutally stabs the hammer right in the prince's chest. Several red rubies from Rhaegar's armor swing in the air, scattering all around the sand. Barristan sees the hammer crushing in his prince and yells as loudly as ever. Ned can hardly believe it. Rhaegar collapses on his knees, but Robert grabs him by his throat, ordering to say where Lyanna is. Where is she? Rhaegar only gargles up some blood, and then only says one word. Lyanna. She is the last thing Rhaegar sees before his eyes, right until Robert slams his hammer as hard as he can against the head of the prince. Rhaegar Targaryen falls dead in the river, with Robert Baratheon standing next to him. It seems as if everyone has seen it, and just like that, numerous Targaryen loyalists lay down their weapons and surrender. Others run away and flee. Eddard is speechless. Jon and Hoster are as well. Howland has a slight wound on his arm, but is also alright. Barristan Selmy is wounded in his leg. He feels horrible as he sees the dead body of his prince. But this sadness is completely overpowered by a loud chant of all the thousands of rebels. Robert! Robert Baratheon! Robert Baratheon, the new king of Westeros! Long live the one true king! Robert looks at all of them, feeling like a conqueror. It's at this moment he knows. This is his destiny. The cheers and chants of the victorious rebels spread throughout the land. All the while, the red rubies of Rhaegar's armor are partly taken away with the water, going down the stream, never to be seen again.